Friends, chess enthusiasts, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about high-level chess, and I'll show you a game played by the third world chess champion José Raúl Capablanca. It's a game from 1929, and in this match we will see how understanding the game plan and the underlying idea can sometimes be much more important than calculation. I often tell you this: training your calculation and tactics is important. But if you only focus on calculation and tactics, it won't get you anywhere, because this calculation, these tactics need to be directed. So today we'll see how Capablanca managed to win this game against Trebal once again. I've awarded both of them the honorary title of Grandmaster, even though I imagine that in 1929 there weren't any titles yet. Anyway, that's fine. Of course, we give them that. Actually, Capablanca held the title of World Champion, which is worth a bit more than Grandmaster. Anyway, let's take a look at this game and try to understand what we can learn from it in terms of chess. So it starts as a queen's-pawn game, a Slav that turns into a variation of the triangle system. At this point, Capablanca plays a move that, let's say, is still perfectly playable today, but it's not one of the main lines because he plays bishop to g5. But if we think about it, this move hides a very strong strategic idea, which comes into play if bishop e7 is played, which is the strongest move. Here, according to the computer, in fact, black, here Tribal plays bishop e7, Capablanca plays bishop takes e7, and queen takes e7. What has Capablanca achieved with all this? He has exchanged black's good bishop, you see? Black has this pawn structural on white squares, so this is the good bishop. And obviously later on he will at some point play the move e3. And so his own bishop could have represented a weakness in his position. So with this exchange, he trades the bad bishop, we could say, for the good bishop. The computer says that nowadays this exchange is an offensive one. However, from a strategic point of view, we'll now see how Capablanca literally crushed his opponent. So who is going to tell Capablanca that the engine today says that bishop to g5 is not the main line? No one. He will always be right. Here he plays knight to d2 and black. Here, in my opinion, he makes an important strategic mistake because, let's say, according to modern theory, we know that black should continue developing his pieces in a normal way and, let's say, should have a fairly acceptable position. However, here, among all options, he plays f5. This is a stone wall, and from here on, the game, let's say, takes a rather clear direction because this move here is deeply wrong. Because black enters a stone wall, but his strongest piece, which is the bishop on d6, which usually is what allows us to generate this stonewall attack with the knight that will go to e4, with the rook coming up to h6. Let's say everything is connected to its power. Without this bishop, obviously, this attack loses some of its strength. So strategically, this position, we can say that this isn't good for black because we enter a stonewall where black has already exchanged his piece. However, it's stronger than just sticking to theory, right? So black shouldn't go into the stone wall if he no longer has the dark squared bishop in practice. That is in terms of how... And then Capablanca manages to win this game. Well, let's say a lot of water will pass under the bridge because this is a normal position where neither side has any particular material disadvantage. Black, let's say, will develop and white will develop, so it doesn't seem all that dramatic. And yet, you'll see how Capablanca played in this game. He didn't give him a chance. He didn't give him a chance. Black plays knight d7, that's reasonable, a flexible move. He still doesn't want to reveal whether this knight wants to go to f6 or h6, because maybe this knight could take the spot on f6, so knight to d7 makes sense. Bishop to d3, Capablanca develops his pieces, and at this point, knight to h6. As I mentioned earlier, black prefers this strategy with the knight, which might go to f7 to better control h6-5. In any case, the other knight will go to f6, so that's not a problem. As you can see, black's moves aren't really moves. You might think, well, whatever. Black is weak, left piece is hanging, lost easily. No, he's actually making moves. Just normal moves. I want to emphasize this to show you now how Capablanca literally annihilates him. Short castling, queen to c2. And let's say that at this point, both sides have developed their game, and at this point g6 is played. Why is it played? Let me try to explain g6 to you. Obviously, black wants to recycle his pieces, maybe play knight to f7. However, here this is a fairly well-known theme. In the stone wall, it gives white the opportunity to capture on d5, and every time white captures on d5, black would like to recapture with this pawn. Because in this way, obviously, let's say, he opens up his influence on the file. Here, obviously, as you can see, it's not possible because I will capture with this pawn. So black here is forced to capture with the other pawn, ending up with the strategic weakness, with the closed file, and with the bishop blocked. And so for this reason, black plays g6 first in order to be able to respond to c takes d5, always with e takes d5. So again, you see, black in any case is playing his own game. And now comes the concept. As we said in the introduction, the grandmaster is not the one who calculates better, but the one who effectively knows the plans for the position. That is, here Capablanca played, in my opinion, the whole game as if in pre-move. What is the strategic plan in this position? White definitely has a development advantage, you see. His pieces are much more active than black's pieces. In particular, look at the bishop. The bishop is extremely passive. How do you go about it? By making use of this development advantage, opening up the lines, because as long as the lines remain closed, our development advantage obviously won't exist. That is, we won't accomplish anything. The position is closed, so how do we exploit our dynamic advantage? So here, the plan for the position is to open the lines, and we do that with the breakthrough pushes b4 and b5. This way, we try to open up the queen side. If this happens and we open up the position, white will definitely have a lot to play for. And so Capablanca plays rook to b1, trying to prepare b4 and b5, knight to f6, okay. Meanwhile, Capablanca plays knight to e5, which certainly doesn't hurt, and then f4, bishop to d7. Black tries to develop knight to f3, knight to f3. Also, let's say here he's immediately posing a small problem, a positional one. I don't know how many of you will be able to notice it because it's really, really subtle. That is one of the moves in this position. As for black, it could be to play knight to e4, knight to e4. A normal move, black always wants to bring a knight to e4, so already knight to e4. For me, it's a move that strategically loses out in terms of game plans, because look here, knight takes f7, I first exchange this knight, then I also exchange the other one, and we end up in a position where the bishop will be totally dominated by this knight. You see how strategic plans then influence the outcome of the game. And it's not just that. Again, I repeat, this is very important. It's not about calculation, because in this position, I don't need to get there by calculation. I shouldn't make a move like knight to e4, but I need to get there through strategic concepts, through positional concepts. Anyway, black plays, this rook plays rook to d8, and white plays b4 and bishop to e8. Black begins. Let's say black has a somewhat unpleasant position, but still, nothing has really happened yet. Rook fc1, Capablanca improves his pieces, a6, queen f2. Pay attention, this is a very, very interesting plan. Did you see how Capablanca at a certain point here could have played the move b5, but he doesn't rush to play it? b5, okay? He's preparing his pieces, so first let's try to amplify our advantage. What is played here? Knight takes f5 and knight d7. Again, should we exchange this knight or not? We shouldn't exchange it because this one here is our asset in the position. The moment we exchange this knight, we definitely get a position that's better, but only slightly better. Okay? Instead, here this knight guarantees us better play. Look at this knight, how it's right here in the thick of things, right? So we don't want to give away this advantage. Like saying, let's exchange the knight and I'll solve your position for you. Whoever has a space advantage generally shouldn't exchange pieces. You see me again, I play knight to f3, not because I'm calculating that the knight loses on d7. No, it's simply that black has less space, so I don't exchange pieces. Knight to f3. If I exchange pieces, if I make the exchange I mentioned earlier, bishop takes knight, but that's another concept. Then I enter an endgame where the knight dominates the bishop. Rook to c8. And now white gains space on the queen side with c5 and a4. He arranges, let's say, everything that needs to be arranged on the queen side. And at this point, however, comes the greatness of the player. This is truly a moment. This, guys, is one of those classic games you show to students. It's an incredibly instructive game. Now, theoretically, white could play the move b5, as we mentioned earlier. White's objective is to open up the game, so here he could play b5 and start making progress on the queen side, and it could probably even be a good idea. But let's look at black's position. Black has no counterplay at all. Black is passive across the entire board, so why should I rush to play b5 and start hostilities? If black has no counterplay, before I start hostilities, what should I do? I maximize my advantage across the whole board. What does he do? Capablanca, h3, g4. He also takes space on the king side, so he maximizes the pressure on the king side. Look at what he does. Bishop to d7, rook to c2, rook to g2. So here he has already won the battle on the queen side and says, okay, whenever I want, I can play b5, I can do whatever I want on the queen side. But before playing b5 and opening up the game, I also want to maximize the king side. Rook to g8, g5, h4, h5. You see, he's also creating this attack on the king side, so he's dominating on both wings of the board. Rook to h8, rook to h2, queen to c7, queen to c3. Here, let's say very calmly, look at how he improves his pieces. King to f2, rook to h1, he's in no hurry at all. Queen to e1, probably queen to e1. Completely pointless, but here white can afford it. Let's say to wait and see what happens. Rook to b8, queen to e3. So he makes this maneuver, maybe also just to buy some time, and now he starts hostilities. Look here, b5. Pawn takes b5, h6 check, the king has to go to f8. And what happens now that I open up the queen side? With black, because he had to defend the king side, now finds himself with passive pieces on the other side of the board. So now I break in forcefully on the queen side, guys. It's a fantastic technique. King to e7, so you try to activate the rooks, b6, too late. Here we are, rook to c8. Obviously, black is at the mercy of the position, and now I simply put the rook on a7. I bring my pieces over, and here, let's say Capablanca really took his time with ease. Guys, look at what he did. Rook to a4, pointless. King to g3, pointless. King to h4. Pointless, but it helps you understand the concept. That is, before starting hostilities, he improves his pieces as much as possible. These moves are probably pointless, but he felt he could improve things. For him, the king on h4 was safer, so he brings the king to h4. Why does he bring the king to h4? Sorry then, he brings it back to g3. Because now he realizes that he wants to bring this knight, yes, exactly, to g3, maybe even get the knight to g5. So do you see? He's kind of playing cat and mouse because he's achieved such a dominant position that he can do whatever he wants. And now, well, he finally brings in the pieces to win. I bring the knight to a5, and then of course I bring the bishop to a6. I can't capture because I take this one, or rather it's not like there's an alternative. If I don't take the pawn on b7, I take this one. And here, a little tactic to capture the second pawn as well, I take this one. Obviously at this point there's nothing left to say about the position, because now, rook to a7 check, rook to c7, c6, b7, and so on and so forth. In short, here, obviously, white has completely won and black resigned. What really strikes me about this game is, you see, he wasn't in a hurry to win it with your queen at the moment when the opponent didn't. Because this, guys, careful, this is an important point. If our opponent has counterplay, we need to hurry, okay? Because if our opponent has counterplay, we can't just sit back. But when our opponent is passive and doesn't have any real counterplay, we can amplify the strength of our position. So he also amplified his strength on the king side. So that then, when he opened up the queen side, he came in with all his firepower. Black had a lot of trouble defending and in fact collapsed right away. Here, white won a game purely through strategy. There wasn't really any calculation involved, as you saw at a certain point, right guys? At a certain point, he just sat there and relaxed. He even took his time. King to h4, king to g3, because the position is so strategically won for white. You can even take 2 or 3 moves, go grab a coffee, it's won anyway. And it's not like she made any huge mistakes. Yes, she made a few minor conceptual errors, but she played a so-called normal game. She was annihilated. She was completely annihilated. So guys, as you can see, knowing the game plans is extremely important. Sometimes it's even more important than calculation, because if we know the correct game plan, we can carry it out almost without even thinking, or at least we just think about the basic concepts, avoiding basic mistakes. And then the important thing is to have the right plan. So I hope that today's game has taught you something. It taught me a lot. In my opinion, it's a really, really instructive game. And so, as always, if you want to support these analyses and this channel, subscribe, and that's it. I'll see you in the next videos.